It was late on a summer night in 1965. Johnny Cash was driving through a small town in Tennessee, heading back to Nashville after a concert. The roads were dark and empty. Most people were asleep. It was the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, until Cash saw the lights. Up ahead, maybe a quarter mile, there was a gathering. Headlights, flashlights, a crowd of people in the middle of the road. Cash slowed down, trying to figure out what was happening. At first, he thought it might be an accident, people helping someone whose car had broken down. Then he got closer, and he realized what he was actually seeing. A crowd of white men, 20 or 25 of them, some holding baseball bats, others with rope, all of them surrounding a young black man who was on his knees in the dirt. Cash's blood went cold. He knew exactly what this was. He'd grown up in the South. He'd seen the aftermath of this kind of violence. And he knew if he kept driving, if he minded his own business, that young man would be dead within the hour. Cash made a decision. He pressed down on the accelerator, drove straight toward the crowd, and then hit the brakes hard. His car skidded to a stop directly between the mob and the man they were surrounding. The crowd turned, startled, angry. Who was interrupting them? Cash opened his door and stepped out. The headlights from his car illuminated the scene. The young man on the ground looked terrified. He was bleeding from his mouth. His shirt was torn, but he was alive. Cash walked slowly toward the space between the man and the crowd, stood there, planted his feet, made it clear he wasn't moving. "What's going on here?" Cash asked. His voice was steady, calm, but there was steel underneath it. One of the men in the crowd, older, probably the ringleader, stepped forward. "This doesn't concern you, stranger. Keep driving." "I asked what's going on," Cash repeated. "This boy attacked a white woman. We're handling it." "Did he? Or is that just what someone said?" "It's what happened. Now get out of the way before you get hurt too." Cash didn't move. He looked at the crowd, at the faces illuminated by flashlights and car headlights. Some of them looked angry. Others looked uncertain. A few looked ashamed but weren't willing to leave. "If you want to hurt this man," Cash said, his voice carrying through the night air, "you'll have to go through me first." The crowd went quiet. They were looking at Cash now, really looking, trying to place him. Then someone in the back said, "Wait, that's Johnny Cash." The recognition rippled through the crowd. Johnny Cash, the man in black, the voice they heard on the radio, the face they'd seen on television.
The ringleader's expression changed, not to respect, but to calculation. "Mr. Cash, this isn't your business. This is a local matter." "It became my business when I drove up and saw what you were about to do," Cash said. "Now I'm standing here, and I'm not moving." "We outnumber you 20-1, the ringleader said. "I know, but I know every one of you, your families, your children. Is this what you want them to remember? That you were here tonight? That you did this?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few men exchanged glances. Cash continued, his voice quieter but somehow more powerful. "You go through with this, and tomorrow morning your kids are going to wake up with a father who's a murderer. Your wives are going to be married to killers. Your churches are going to have lynchers sitting in the pews. Is that what you want?" No one answered. "And I'll know. I'll remember every face here, every single one of you, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. You want that? You want Johnny Cash to know you as the man who was part of a lynch mob?" The silence stretched. The young man on the ground was crying quietly, but nobody was looking at him anymore. They were all looking at Cash, at each other, at the ground. Finally, one man in the back turned and walked away, got in his truck and drove off. Then another, then 3 more. The ringleader stood his ground for a moment longer. "This isn't over," he said to Cash. "Yes, it is. Go home, all of you. Go home and ask yourselves if this is who you want to be." The ringleader stared at Cash for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. The rest of the crowd followed. Within 5 minutes, they were all gone. Cars driving away, flashlights disappearing into the darkness. Cash stood there until the last vehicle left. Then he walked over to the young man still kneeling on the ground. "You okay?" Cash asked. The young man looked up at him. His face was bruised. His eyes were wide with shock. "They were gonna kill me." "I know. Can you stand?" The young man nodded. Cash helped him to his feet. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Williams." "Marcus, do you have family around here?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm from Memphis. I was just passing through. Car broke down. I was walking to find help when they—" His voice broke. "They said I looked at a woman wrong. I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't do anything." "I believe you. Come on, get in my car. I'm taking you out of here." Marcus hesitated. "I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not trouble, and you're not staying in this town tonight. Get in."
Marcus got in the passenger seat. Cash drove. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. Marcus was shaking. Cash could see him out of the corner of his eye, trying to process what had almost happened to him. Finally, Marcus said, "Why did you stop?" Cash glanced at him. "What? Why did you stop? You could have kept driving. Nobody would have blamed you. But you stopped. You put yourself between me and them. Why?" Cash thought about how to answer. Because it was the right thing to do. "That's it?" "That's it," Cash said. "I saw something wrong happening, and I had the power to stop it. So I did. You could have gotten hurt." "Maybe," Cash acknowledged. "But I didn't, and you're alive, so it worked out." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you. I don't know how to say it enough. Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Cash said. "You just have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll tell this story. Not about me. About what almost happened to you. About how close you came. Because this is still happening, Marcus. All over the South. All over the country. Black men being killed for nothing. And people need to hear about it. They need to know it's real." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll tell it." Cash drove Marcus all the way to Memphis, dropped him off at his family's house at 3 in the morning. Marcus's mother answered the door, saw her son bruised and shaken, and pulled him into her arms. Before Cash left, Marcus's mother grabbed his hand. "I don't know who you are, but thank you for bringing my boy home." "I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time," Cash said. He drove back to Nashville as the sun was coming up. Didn't tell June what had happened, didn't tell anyone. It was just something he'd done, something that needed to be done. But Marcus Williams told the story, told his family, told his friends, and over the years the story spread. About the night Johnny Cash stood between a lynch mob and an innocent man. About how Cash had used his fame, his presence, his voice to save a life. Cash never spoke about it publicly. When reporters asked him about his views on civil rights, he'd talk about equality and justice and doing what's right. But he never mentioned that night in Tennessee. It wasn't a story he needed to tell. It was just something he'd done. Decades later, in 1995, Marcus Williams was interviewed for a documentary about racial violence in the 1960s South. He was asked about his experiences, and he told the story of that night. "I was 22 years old," Marcus said, "and I was about to die. For nothing. For existing. For being black in a place where that was considered a crime. And then Johnny Cash showed up. Drove his car right between me and that mob. And he didn't just ask them to stop. He made them stop. He made them see themselves, made them think about what they were doing, and they left. "Did you ever see Johnny Cash again?" the interviewer asked. "No," Marcus said, "but I thought about him every day for the rest of my life. Every time I saw my kids, every time I held my grandchildren, every good thing that happened to me after that night existed because Johnny Cash stopped his car, because he stood between me and evil. And he didn't do it for recognition. He didn't do it for credit. He did it because it was right." What would you say to him if you could? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I'd say thank you for seeing me as a human being worth saving, for risking yourself when you didn't have to, for showing me that there are good people in the world, people who will stand up even when it costs them something. Johnny Cash saved my life, and I never got to tell him what that meant, what it still means." The documentary aired in 1997. By then, Johnny Cash was in declining health, but people who saw the documentary started asking him about Marcus Williams, about whether the story was true. Cash's response was typically understated. "I remember that night," he said in one interview. "I remember stopping. I remember a young man who needed help, and I remember thinking that if I kept driving, I'd have to live with that for the rest of my life. So I stopped. That's all." "Do you think you saved his life?" Cash shrugged. "I hope so. But I also think about all the times I didn't stop, all the injustices I saw and didn't speak up about, all the times I could have done something and didn't. That one night doesn't make me a hero. It just makes me someone who did the right thing once when it really mattered." "Would you do it again?" "Without hesitation," Cash said. "Every time." Johnny Cash died in 2003. At his funeral, among the hundreds of mourners, was Marcus Williams. He was 70 years old by then, gray hair, grandchildren, a long life lived because of one night in 1965. He stood in the back during the service, didn't make a scene, didn't try to talk to the family, just paid his respects to the man who'd saved his life. But after the service, Roseanne Cash, Johnny's daughter, found him. "You're Marcus Williams," she said. Marcus nodded, surprised she knew who he was. "My father talked about you," Roseanne said. "Not to the press, but to us, to the family. He said that night was one of the most important things he'd ever done, that he was grateful he'd been there, that he was grateful he'd stopped." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "He saved my life." "I know," Roseanne said. "And he never forgot it, never regretted it. He carried that night with him as proof that one person can make a difference, that standing up matters, that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, is what defines us." Marcus wiped his eyes. "Thank you for telling me that." "Thank you for being here," Roseanne said. "It would have meant a lot to him." The story of Johnny Cash standing between a lynch mob and Marcus Williams became part of Cash's legacy. Not the most famous part, not the story that got told as often as the prison concerts or the comeback albums or the love story with June. But it was, in many ways, the most important story, because it showed who Johnny Cash was when nobody was watching, when there were no cameras, no reporters, no record contracts at stake. Just a man seeing another man in danger and deciding that was unacceptable, that if he had the power to stop it, he would, even if it meant putting himself at risk, even if it meant standing alone against a crowd. That's what happened on a dark road in Tennessee in 1965. Johnny Cash stopped his car, stood between a lynch mob and an innocent man, and with nothing but his presence, his voice, and his willingness to see the humanity in a stranger, he saved a life. It wasn't the biggest thing Johnny Cash ever did. It wasn't the most publicized, but it was real, and it mattered. To Marcus Williams, it meant everything. And to Johnny Cash, it was simply what needed to be done, what any decent person would do if they had the courage. Stand up, speak out, and refuse to let evil win without a fight. That's the story of the night Johnny Cash stopped a lynch mob. Not with violence, Not with a weapon, but with his presence, his words, his refusal to look away. And in doing so, he gave Marcus Williams the greatest gift one person can give another: the chance to live, to have a family, to grow old, to be a grandfather, to have a life. All because Johnny Cash stopped his car on a dark road and said, "If you want to hurt this man, you'll have to go through me first." And meant it.